The video game industry can be brutal, with news coming out seemingly every other month about chaotic development processes, studio meltdowns, and corporate backstabbings. It's a surprise so many great games get made at all. In fact, the cutthroat nature of the industry has resulted in some of gaming's most beloved giants either being killed off completely, or worse, forced to continue as husks of their former selves. However, while a lot of franchises get the boot simply because they don't make a sizable enough profit for their publishers, there are many fondly remembered series from years gone by whose deaths weren't quite so easily explained. I'm Josh from What Culture, and these are 10 reasons behind why your favourite video game franchises died. Number 10. Everyone hated DMC's new look. The latest entry in the Devil May Cry series was doomed before anyone even had a chance to play it. Rebooting the franchise for modern audiences, Capcom decided its protagonist, Dante, needed a new look to attract a bigger audience, a creative decision that cost them the entire series in the process. Even though the gameplay itself was pretty good, the new angst-ridden Dante didn't sit well with fans, who loudly decried the decision to give the Demon Slayer a pretty boy look and a hot topic attitude. It didn't help that some scenes in the game, such as the new Dante criticizing the glorious silver locks of the old, appeared to be nothing more than middle fingers to longtime fans, only further adding fuel to the fire of this backlash. Number 9. Duke Nukem Forever couldn't live up to 14 years of hype. Announced in 1997, Duke Nukem Forever wanted to be the cutting edge of first-person shooters, rather than just another goofy pastiche. After a constant string of missed deadlines and pushed release dates in the late 90s though, the game vanished completely in 2001, going off the grid for the next 8 years. During this period, Forever was rebooted several times as the studio constantly switched up the title's engine to keep up with the developments in technology, rather than just using this new tech for the games that would come after Duke. Allegedly nearly complete, 3D Realms suffered huge financial troubles going into 2009, hit with a lawsuit by Take-Two over their inability to finish the game after over a decade of development. With production taken away from the original studio, Gearbox Software came in to polish up the final release, pushing it out the door in 2011, 14 years after it was originally announced. Of course, by then gamers had moved on and didn't warm to the pervy, out-of-touch dinosaur that was Duke Nukem. Number 8. Red Faction Armageddon bankrupted THQ. Losing money hand over fist thanks to a string of big-name failures, including the critically adored Red Faction Guerrilla, THQ attempted to retrofit their biggest franchise to appeal to a wider audience in one last-ditch effort to right their sinking ship, stripping away the free-form open-world design of Guerrilla in favor of standard cinematic cover shooting. Of course, getting rid of, the aspects that people actually liked about the series didn't help THQ capture the audience it wanted, and the company ended up losing even more money at a time where it couldn't afford such a substantial loss. With the publisher being dissolved shortly thereafter, Armageddon wasn't the only reason THQ tanked, but the complete misfires that were the two Xbox 360 era Red Faction titles were the final nails in the coffin for this once revered publisher. Number 7. Tony Hawk went back to basics and failed miserably. After a couple of Tony Hawk's games that thought making players buy a cheap plastic skateboard was a good idea, Activision promised to move away from the wacky humor and dodgy add-ons of the latest games and return to the core skateboarding that made the series famous in the first place, announcing a true sequel to their revered Pro Skater franchise. The heart seemed to be in the right place, but when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 released, instead of rejuvenating the franchise by returning to its roots, it was essentially one giant f*** you to the fans who had given Activision the benefit of the doubt. Even worse, after the game released, it was rumored that the real reason the sequel was so catastrophically poor was because Activision had to quickly push it out the door before the company lost the rights to the series, sacrificing what should have been Tony Hawk's grand return to relevancy in the process. Number 6. Activision sidelined Crash Bandicoot in his own game. After Crash Bandicoot's first PS2 effort, The Wrath of Cortex, failed to capture the magic of Naughty Dog's original trilogy, Activision made an attempt to modernize the PlayStation mascot with an entirely new look. After rebranding the character, thankfully not with an emo makeover this time, the series introduced the Titans, large tank-like creatures that Crash could control in specific set pieces. While a neat idea on paper, after a few releases that put more and more focus on these monsters, it got to the point where Crash felt like a side character in his own game, as you spent most of your time controlling anyone else but him. Putting the franchise down after the dreadful Mind Over Mutant, the studio gambled their hopes on a reboot of fan-favourite Crash Team Racing, a game which was canned before it even got to the prototype stage. After that, the Bandicoot's days were well and truly over. Number 5. Mass Effect Andromeda was made in only 18 months. Originally planned to be a much more open title with a seemingly infinite array of procedurally generated planets to explore, the developers of Andromeda spent years trying to finalize their ambitious vision, but difficulty developing for the Frostbite engine dogged them at every turn. As deadlines loomed, the team had to strip down their initial plans for the game, going from wanting to include hundreds of planets to a mere 30, and eventually scaling that down to the paltry 6 the game shipped with. While those issues damaged the title for sure, internal conflict and severe understaffing were the spin-off's main problems in the end, with big-name creatives leaving halfway through production and problems with the game's tech impacting the development of the story. It meant that although the title was worked on technically for years, the bulk of it was created within a small 18-month window that took the game right down to the wire, leaving BioWare with no time to polish these hilarious bugs that made the game infamous at launch. Number 4. The Timesplitters 4 developers couldn't catch a break. Timesplitters 4 was actually announced all the way back in 2007, but quickly went dark after developers at Free Radical ran into financial trouble a year later. With the team being purchased by Crytek, ultimately becoming known as Crytek UK, the fourth game in the series was put on hold indefinitely. But that didn't stop the former developers from teasing the title's potential return. In interviews over the next few years, Crytek UK would go back and forth on the issue of a new Timesplitters game, as rumours began to swirl about a new release entering development in 2011. When this happened, I lost my shit. However, after escaping bankruptcy once before, Crytek UK's new parent company ran into their own financial troubles a couple years later, with the studio suffering massive layoffs in the process. The remainder of the team were transferred to Dambuster Studios to work with Deep Silver on the latest Homefront sequel, and we all know how that game turned out. Seriously, these developers are great at their jobs, but they're obviously cursed because everything they work on just falls apart. Number 3. Sonic relied on gimmicks to compensate for terrible 3D. 3D has always been seen as the death sentence for Sonic. The myth goes that the fast-paced platformer just couldn't translate to a 3D space, where the Hedgehog's mechanics came across as awkward and uninspired. But while this is true in part, what really killed the franchise wasn't the inevitable shift towards 3D, but actively terrible decisions by Sega's creative team. Instead of sticking to the core ethos of Sonic after multiple failed attempts at 3D, the 2006 Xbox 360 title perhaps being the final straw, Sega just threw everything at the wall in an attempt to make its iconic mascot relevant again. Sadly, it just led to one baffling mistake after another. A game where Sonic becomes a werewolf? Yeah, that happened. A shooter that drops Sonic entirely in favour of the darker and more teen-oriented Shadow? That must have made perfect sense at the time. How about a Kinect-only Sonic hoverboard racing game? Every single one of those words is like a knife to my heart. As this farce went on, Sonic lost its identity completely, and the franchise has never been the same since, and it took a fan to return to its roots to give the series any chance at another life. Number 2. Silent Hill went to America and got lost in translation. After 4 main entries under the watchful eye of longtime developer Team Silent, the Silent Hill series was starting to feel a bit stale. Wanting to chase the Resident Evil 4 revolution, the Japanese team that headed up those classic early games was taken off the series completely, as publisher Konami looked to other developers from across the globe to put their own unique spin on the survival horror title. Unfortunately, once Konami switched up the developers and gave studios from the West a go at their horror franchise, Silent Hill devolved into a shell of its former self. Losing the charm of the original games, the first few titles felt like poor imitations of Team Silent's signature style, while the later releases played more like budget versions of Silent Hill rather than true blockbuster experiences. And even then, after years of disappointing fans with subpar releases, Konami stealthily announced a new major entry into the series with the PT PlayStation demo in 2014, before, perhaps predictably, quickly giving it the axe after a public fallout with the game's developer. A controversy which leads us nicely onto how, number 1, Konami screwed over the staff of Metal Gear Solid 5. Reports of Konami's meddling with Metal Gear Solid 5 had been circulating almost a year before the game itself was due to hit shelves. With the company allegedly taking aim at series director Hideo Kojima, the publisher began to stealthily remove the developer's name from the marketing and box art, with rumors swirling that he had been taken off the title in its final months completely. Even worse, while still working to finish the game, Kojima was allegedly no longer allowed to directly oversee production, forced instead to communicate to his team through third parties to get even the most basic directives across. Reports also started circulating about Konami allegedly bringing its iron fist down on all the developers working on the game, keeping track of their every move, limiting their privacy, and shaming the individuals who complained. So ever wonder why the second half of the Phantom Pain just reused old levels and felt plain old unfinished? Why the team suddenly disbanded after they completely finished the game, or why Kojima rarely ever speaks about Metal Gear at all? You can blame it all on the Orwellian breakup of this 30-year marriage between publisher and developer. So that's our list. Let me know in the comments whether you guys think these series deserved better, and while you're there, don't forget to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for even more lists like this every single day. I've been Josh, and if you need me, I'll be crying into my copy of Timesplitters too. See ya.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Aren't you a star? Don't forget to subscribe below, and also the people who made this video, they're right here, so go and follow them and give them some love. If you want to see more content, there's probably some stuff flowing up above my head. Why not check it out? It could be fun. I'm not your dad.